Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. Appreciate you guys joining us. I'm in a slightly different place than usual, but it throws back to when we first started. Brian Johnson, our city manager, if people don't know. Right? When we started this as prime lunchtime with city manager. So I decided to come to Park 27 Steakhouse to have my lunch. Sorry, Brian.
I
A
was gonna
few
say it
words.
looks good, Rico, but we couldn't quite, link up on the geographic
Yes,
location.
yes. So I was going to do this actually at Atlanta Tech Park, but then I decided, you know what? I want lunch. And what better place to come to than Park 27 here in the Forum? And by the way, this is not a paid sponsorship. It's a great restaurant. So I just decided I should come here. We could do the podcast from here. We're not calling it Prime Lunchtime with the city manager anymore, but maybe we should go back to that.
Right.
But this is kind of cool. So I'm going to set my lunch aside for a little bit. I started eating it before we got into it, but we're going to set it aside because we got stuff to talk about. Um, so, CineBistro. Let's throw that out there because the show's really about that. And at some point, I think I want to end up doing actually a live stream on Instagram at CineBistro, just walking it through and just inviting people to make comments live that I can answer. Because I think I know a lot of what's going on. Don't know everything. Certainly know a lot of the comments on Facebook and Instagram that people have been throwing out there. Um, but and we even just covered it. There's an article in the actually in the issue of Peachtree Corners magazine that's hitting mailboxes this week. So that talks a bit about the purchase price, some of the process that this went into. Um, and frankly, some people say there wasn't enough detail. There wasn't enough of like, why did the city do this? Did they buy this with no idea in mind? So there's a commentary that's going out there, and we can discuss some of that. But first, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us, again, we've covered this a little bit in the previous podcast, but now we're further into it. So tell us how this transpired a little bit. Um, and why the city decided to buy this food court development property that CineBistro was in. Considering CineBistro closed, what, how many months ago? It's been a few
What,
months,
8, 10 months ago?
10 months ago. And before that, quite frankly, probably should have closed maybe even 8 months before that. They were not doing well in business here. And that whole business model is not doing so well anyway across the country. It was a nice vogue thing, and then COVID hit, unfortunately. So that ruined a bit of it. But so why don't you tell us what's going on? Where are we so far?
Well, that's a great starting point when it comes to what CineBistro was. And, it goes back to the decision to do the public-private partnership to build the town center to begin with. And, mixed use developments, like even your old school shopping malls, we all understand the concept of an anchor tenant.
Mhm.
That tenant that tends to be the big, the big gorilla in the room, the one that's attracting in and of itself a lot of activity, and you try to build around that so all of the smaller activity, the smaller fish get to feed off of what the
Right.
big fish draws.
Right.
That concept still sound today, but
Mhm.
what is it, 10, 11 years ago when the public-private partnership deal between the city and Fuquay came to being, Fuquay's intent was the anchor tenant to be a boutique movie theater.
Mhm.
Well, 10, 11 years ago, that would have been that type of anchor tenant use would have been fine. We would all been like, oh, cool, boutique theater that had a chef-driven restaurant in it. That's kind of
Right.
unique.
Scratch
Well,
kitchen. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Mhm.
So, but then of course, fast forward to COVID, and that just changed the theater industry forever.
Yeah.
And when you came out of that, the activity at CineBistro just through COVID, of course, went to zero, and then it just
Mhm.
never recovered. And it was probably a dead tenant walking ever since COVID hit. It was
Yeah.
just a matter of when, not if. So then CMX parent company CineBistro closed this and one other location in Metro Atlanta. And Fuquay did reach out to a few other theater operators just to see if they could have somebody come in and just try to keep doing the same thing. And they had no takers. That's that's just to completely avoid the fact that maybe they did find one, but was CineBistro, even when it was open, generating the amount of activity that we all thought an anchor tenant should generate? And I'm not sure
Mhm.
that's the case. That being
Well,
said,
some people even point out now, why didn't we? I think sometimes people think the city directs some of this stuff, like getting businesses leased. City, this is a private business. City does not demand what businesses should be, and they can guide a little bit. Someone suggested AMC theaters, but AMC is such a huge theater. This little boutique, six 100 seat mini theaters is not their business model.
it isn't. And although Fuquay's credit, they reached out to every theater owner out there because, they're like, well, maybe AMC wants to get into the boutique theater business, but they weren't interested. The other boutique theater owners that operate weren't. The closest they got were some operators that ended up having like maybe two of the, you know, small theaters, and then they
Yeah.
had other type of stuff in there, like it could be, golf simulators, or I mean, it was a mix of that, mix of entertainment. Anyway, so that wasn't a use. So then Fuquay, as the
Mhm.
owner, was like, well, what are we going to do with the building? And they started shopping it to other use cases. Now, the city council was going to need to be involved in any use that wasn't a theater. And that was a condition of the rezoning. So what Fuquay would do is they would end up having somebody that was kicking tires on the building. All
Mhm.
of these were adaptive reuse of the building. This was basically somebody that wanted to come in and gut the entire, interior of the building out and put a different use. And there's a mix of these. A few of them, I had to sign an NDA, so I can't give you the example, but
Mhm.
a few I can, and that is, we had uses like they were like, well, let's cut it up and turn it into co-working space.
Mm.
Well, I mean, one, we have a lot of those in the city. One,
Yeah.
100 yards away at Rome,
Right.
is also that generating the amount of activity that you would see at a town center that, we're not sure that was the best use. And again,
Mhm.
Rome and other co-working space would be cannibalized by it. So there's an example where like that's not a good use of that building. We had things like the jumpy house, like Sky Zone
Yes.
types of
Right.
stuff.
So
You
Fuqua made you privy to these types of
Yes,
things
and
that they're
what and
approaching.
why they would is they would end up reaching out to me saying, "Hey, if we formally submitted, say a co-working space or a big jumpy,
Yeah.
Sky Zone type of thing to city council, would they approve it?" And I would,
Mm.
of course, discuss with council, this, and I would get enough feedback to say, no, you're not going to get support for those uses. We also had apartments came up,
And no doubt, it's always apartments,
right.
always
There's always
multifamily.
apartments, but
Yeah.
those are some of the use cases I can talk about that
Mhm.
when you
Mhm.
think about it, city council was like, those are not uses that are in keeping with the objective of creating the town center. They're not adding to, the experience there, the restaurants and retail spaces around there. And so, we were kind of, we're in a good, council was in a almost like a position of right of first refusal, but
Mhm.
we didn't get to control it because we weren't the owner. And there
Uh,
are,
But but they would have to ask for a rezoning or a special use permit or something to
It was
vary?
depending on, yeah, well, it would be a change of conditions on some of the uses. Some of them were radical enough that it would require a rezoning. And then, of course, you get into, the city can't sit back and be like, even if we thought a theater was the only use we wanted, and we were
Mhm.
like, we're not going to accept anything but a theater. Well, an owner of property does have rights. There are property owner rights, and one of them is highest and best use.
Mhm.
At a certain point, Fuquay was like, we are unable to meet that one use case. Nobody's
Mhm.
interested in it. We have a legal right to develop our property in some way. So there would have had to have been some adjustment. Now, not necessarily radical enough to say, oh, well, in that case, we'll just let you build apartments. But there
Mhm.
has to be something somebody can do with their property. And so it was going to have to open the door to some other uses. And it's just kind of like, what would those uses be if we don't get to control it? So, anyway, these are all being thought about.
Mhm.
But then Fuquay made an internal decision that they were just like, look, we don't want to get involved in constantly having to go back to the city over and over and whatever. We just want out. It's the only remaining parcel that they own at the town center. So they made an
They
unsolicited.
don't own any other, everything else is out parcel or something else.
It is. It's owned
Okay.
by a few out parcels, like Xfinity, Lazy Dog, Uncle Jack's are owned by other
Really?
people.
So wait, Xfinity also owns their piece?
Yes,
Really?
Xfinity and Uncle Jack's are different,
Okay.
Lazy Dog's different, but then
Okay.
basically the remainder of all the retail is then one other owner, and that's Center Square is the name of the
Okay.
company.
Right. Right.
They bought the
Right.
entire retail track.
So what was the
So
value? So what would have been the value of CineBistro if it was put out on the market, the building, the land, which incorporates it's just the building, right? Or is it
no,
the
it's
parking
the
lots?
surface parking lot right next
Okay.
to it.
Okay.
Just to the right of the front door as you were walking in
Hmm.
that surface parking lot. So it's about 2 acres in total.
Okay.
And well, so to get to your point real quick, so they made an unsolicited offer to us. And they were kind of like, you know what? You guys are sitting on, city council sitting on the, having to approve a change of condition. Maybe you guys would just be interested in owning it and we're out. And so they made an offer, and then we internally had a discussion. Council agreed that I should do, what's standard practice is the kind of superficial due diligence to make sure that this is something that we should pursue. And by that I mean making sure the title's not encumbered by other debt or whatever, making sure there's no environmental issues with the parcel, like a leaking, fuel tank or an underground or, a hidden Indian burial
Right.
ground or
Right.
something
Yeah,
like
sure.
that all of a sudden we wouldn't be able to do it.
Which would have been found out on the prior construction, but
Well, it
but
should have been. It
right.
should have been,
Yeah,
but
you're right. You're right. You never know.
right, and then the last is to get an appraisal
Mm.
to see, because if it came back and, it was appraised at $1 million and their offer was, 4 million, and we paid 4 million, and it turns out that it's only valued at 1 million,
Mhm.
shame on us on caretakers of public funds. So I did the due diligence, kind of that high level due diligence, and all of it came back good. So then we made a counter offer, and Fuquay ultimately agreed to the 3.2 million, and it was appraised at just under 5 million. So we were certainly under what the
Yes.
market would
Sounds,
right would
yeah.
support.
Yeah.
So then the question became, okay, we actually have a legitimate mechanism to achieve the one thing, the only thing that is necessary for somebody to fully control how a parcel is used, and that is to own it.
So the 3.2 million came out of what's called an opportunity fund. So it
Yep.
came out of cash that the city already had, if I understand correctly. So you all didn't have to go borrow, do a mortgage on the property or anything.
That is correct. So
Mhm.
about 5 years ago, I can't remember. There was some parcel somewhere else about a developer looking to do something, and then they were like, "Well, maybe the city would be interested in doing something with us or whatever." And so council started talking about opportunities that might present themselves out of the blue, and
Mhm.
it could be a really good opportunity that the council wants to move on fast. And so what we came to an agreement on is let's take some of the money that we have in savings and let's segregate a percentage of it
Mhm.
and by ordinance create a special fund. And that special fund would be for the use of, again, targets of opportunity that could just materialize and we need to move. We find the value in moving quickly on it. And so we're going to need some amount of money that's not encumbered by long-term investment constraints. And so this opportunity fund we set up, which is, I believe it's 25% of our general fund operating budget.
Mhm.
And we'll set it aside, and the finance department will keep it in much more of, call it liquid form,
Right.
either
Yeah.
short-term investments or cash or some combination thereof.
Mhm.
But, finance director would be able to get a hold of the money fast and be able to use it. And then that would be money that council knows they could do something with, and we don't have to incur debt.
I'm just impressed that you guys had the forethought of doing that. We don't have a millage rate. In quite a few cities I see either have to do bonds or other things to be able to do this similar type of stuff. And they're not, or they have to borrow, they have to go to the bank. I mean, bonds are usually the case, I guess. But so I'm impressed that actually the city had that foreknowledge to or forethought to be able to do that. Because you could turn around if nothing else, you could turn around and resell it, recoup the money, and then some probably. Yeah. So
And
so
we'll talk about that as an option here in a second. So, so then council ultimately was like, you know what? We may not have this opportunity ever again for the purchase price to be as low as it is, because kind of felt like Fuquay might be a little bit in, maybe more desperate than some owners
mhm,
of parcels are. And let's go ahead and get control. And then let's really work through with the help of some, you know, retail market analysts and the community, which
mhm,
I'll also get to in a second on how they'll come together here shortly. But we could be in a position where council could, really look at what's the best use and see if we can't lock in that use and take our time doing it, not feeling rushed because we've got like debt on the property or we've got some, expiration of some agreement or whatever. We could take as long as we need or as short as we need, but
mhm,
we own it. It wasn't generating a lot of activity even when CineBistro was open, so we're not
yep,
losing out on some big. And so council was like, let's go ahead and take advantage of this. All right, now it'd be an important point before we talk about what's going to be happening from today or from that vote last month going forward is on the process of council coming to that decision. I know there are some people out there who were when they learned about this were like, "Whoa, where did this come from? Why haven't we as a community heard that
yes.
council was considering this?" And that's a fair question to bring up, but I just would remind those who kind of feel that way of a couple things. One is, if we were a private organization and we were considering something like this, we would always know, and then this even goes, is the fact, despite us being a public organization, that we're not the only ones that are in, that do real estate development, speculation, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And if you're a private organization, your decision making on whether you are going to move forward with developing a property or looking to buy it would be done quietly because you don't want to negotiate with yourself or against yourself by letting the world know your strategy,
Mhm.
your pain points, your no higher than, purchase price, all of that stuff that if somebody else knew, they could use against us.
Mhm.
And so this decision of the vote on council wasn't like I got to work that morning and Fuquay was like, "Oh, here's the property," and then I took it to council, that night at a city council meeting.
Yeah.
There was discussions about it for, maybe as long as 2 months because I needed to do some of that again,
Mhm.
cursory due
The due
diligence.
diligence, sure.
It was done in executive session, and no votes were taken prior to our most recent council meeting or last month's council meeting, um, because I didn't need a vote, but I just needed, council was guiding a little bit of, hey, keep going, or that, give them an update. Hey, the title search came back clean. We're, you guys still good
Right.
with me? Continue to move forward. And so that's why in Georgia, there are a couple of categories that are eligible to talk about behind closed doors because it could get problematic if all of the sausage making
Mhm.
was subject to public scrutiny, litigation. You don't want to talk about legal strategies if you're in litigation in the public because then the other side is just taking notes, being like, oh, this is
Sure.
all good to know.
Yeah.
And real estate is another one. So at last month's council meeting, that's when I had all of the initial due diligence back. It was all good. And there was a purchase and sale agreement that we could execute that would then lock in the purchase unless we just decided against it. Meaning Fuquay now, if we signed it, was compelled to sell us unless the
Mhm.
city decided to, leave the agreement prior to the closing date. So I presented to council. I said, here's our opportunity. Here's the PSA.
Mhm.
It has a few additional due diligence items for us to work through, a little bit more granular than the initial ones. But if those all come back clean, we have the exact purchase price of this parcel. Do you want to go forward? Now's the time. And they said yes. So when we came out of that executive session, that's when, and we had told everybody that was in the audience that in that particular case, I knew there was a chance that if council was still good, they were going to make a vote. So I, mentioned, and the mayor did too, that when we went into executive session, when we come back, there is the potential for a vote. And there were a few people who remained, but there was a lot of
Yeah.
people who kind of
That was
left because
that was a long meeting that
it was a
night.
long
Yeah.
meeting. And so, there were a few people who were there and they left, and then they'd come back and be like, well, I've been there before when you've had executive sessions and people tell me, oh, nothing's going to happen. I'm like, well, that is true if I know that there's not going to be a vote,
Right.
because
Right.
then the only thing you're staying for is to hear somebody make a motion to adjourn in a second and the vote. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
But that's why all of it prior to that was out of what your normal person who, is civically
Yeah.
engaged wouldn't
Mhm.
see, is because we had to come up with our strategy and our pain points and our negotiating, price negotiating
Of course, no
strategy
one, no, and no one
behind closed doors,
negotiates, and no one negotiates in public.
right in the open,
Um,
right.
yeah, I mean, even Gwinnett schools, for example, when they buy land for schools, they're not negotiating in public what land they're buying because because they're going
It
to ratchet
drives
up.
up the
Yes,
cost.
yes. When the city put the roundabout at Peachtree Corners Circle and Medlock Bridge, there were certain portions of land you needed to get right to do the roundabout, and that's public. People know the property owner knew, and they wanted a horrendous amount of money for their little piece of nick off their property.
They,
So there
they
were,
did. It drives up the purchase price sometimes when people are like, oh, a public
yes,
organization that has access to, taxpayer money is interested, we're
sure,
going to end up
sure,
jacking our sale
right,
price up.
right,
So, I just wanted to bring that up for those who are like, oh, why is this the first we're hearing? Well,
right,
again, this was an unsolicited offer. We weren't actively, exploring trying to acquire it. It was presented to us. So this was
sure.
a target of opportunity. And then we did, our internal decision making and came to that decision point. And once we did, it was a public vote. And in fact, I then had my communication director that
Mm-hmm.
night send out a, community advisory
Yeah,
to let everybody know it happened, because I'm like, a lot of people, even that were in attendance that left, are not going to look back about, oh, did they do anything? I was like, I want the
sure.
community to know.
Yeah.
So I had him do that. And that all that really did is now we're in control of the parcel. We get to now decide when and how it's used. And that's a process that we've kicked off, but it's a process that will still engage with the community. But yeah,
It's
so
you guys. The city has closed on the property. That was the vote to do the process
well,
back in
not quite.
June.
The vote was to authorize me to sign the PSA, which I did. And that
Okay.
locks Fuquay in. Authorize moving money using opportunity fund money.
Right.
Our closing, and then the PSA says if the city still wants it at the closing date, as long as all of the due diligence, the remaining due
Hmm.
diligence comes back good,
Right.
then we can. Now, like one example would be we ended up having a building inspector come into the current building to tell us the condition of it.
Hmm.
We wanted to know that. That was another piece that we did. I can tell you as we talk now, which is what, July 2nd, I
Correct.
think our
Yeah.
closing date is next Friday.
Okay.
And we will be closing because all of the due diligence came back clean.
Perfect.
So we
So,
will close next week. But so, for purposes of our conversation, we can say, all right, now we're the owner. All right. But all that does is now that just transitions us into a whole nother process.
oh yeah,
We're at
for
the
sure.
very beginning of that
Yeah.
process.
So, and of course, we've shared that online and in print and stuff, and commentary. Probably one of the most commented Facebook posts that we've had, with people commenting all sorts of suggestions, also disagreements, and that the city. Um, we go back to some of the old same messaging that I've heard before. The city, how old is the city now? It's about 13, 14 years old at this point.
Yesterday, we turned 15.
15, that was it. So, and the legislation was like the year before was put in or something. So it's been in a process for such a long time. And the city light portion of it, which is how it became. And I didn't care whether it was city light or full city. I didn't even understand what city light was until I read the stuff, and it was like, well, you know what? That almost doesn't make sense to me. If you're going to be a city, you might as well be a city. And in fact, 2018, state of Georgia decided, well, there is no such thing as city light. You all are a city. So we grew up real quick. Um, and so a lot of the comments have been, well, we're supposed to be a city light, and now we're not a city, and over the past 15 years, city does what it wants, which frankly, there are elections every other year and stuff. So, you know, it's your representatives that are doing all these things. which is, in my mind, not a bad thing. I've hardly disagreed with most things except for maybe too many multifamilies, but that's, we've gone through that. So there were people that will say this shouldn't be a job that a city does. They shouldn't own commercial property. What right do they have to speculate in it? But I think you all have done it in a responsible way. You've used cash. You didn't go get a loan or bonds or anything for this. You have it under the appraised, by far under the appraised value of it. You're eventually going to be able to sell it if you want to, or own it as a venture that city can direct more closely. So I guess the next steps are, now that we're entering this phase, is that you have a company, LLP, was it?
JLL.
JLL. And why don't you go ahead and explain? But essentially, this answers some of the questions that people have said, well, what are you going to all do with it? But the other question was also, well, if you didn't know what you were going to do with it, why did you buy it? Which is, you know, I mean, it's, I don't know how to answer that one.
I
Yeah.
can. So, a
Uh-huh.
couple observations on what you just said. We'll start by saying that, one, let's also again remember that the city wasn't looking to get into real
Right.
estate business
Mhm.
or landlord business or, we weren't looking to do that, but we did have a parcel and a use that has changed.
Mhm.
Again, we talked about theater operation is different now than it was when they first put it in. It That location as it relates to the town center in general and the town green in particular is a really important parcel. We can't afford to allow to go vacant or have a
Yes.
bad use. So we weren't looking to do this. That's one. Two, it is actually not all that uncommon for cities to make the decision that in the interest of a greater good for the community, the city ends up being the owner of stuff. I'll just use a example right near here, city of Duluth.
Okay.
Most of its core downtown buildings are owned by the city of Duluth and they rent it to tenants.
Yes.
City of
Yes.
Decatur owns a lot of their downtown and they're the landlord of tenants and they have downtown development authorities that are doing what they can to make their downtowns as healthy as
Yeah. Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
And
In
but
fact,
you get to control.
to go back to Duluth for a minute, the Red Clay Theater, I believe, is owned by the city. And if it wasn't owned by the city, that might not have that might not do what it's able to do with Eddie Owens Presents and with all the studio stuff they do on the basement level
Yep.
of classes for kids and dance and arts and stuff like that. They lease that out for, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it's like nothing. It's like $1 a year or whatever it is. Those things wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that city stepping in to buy that.
Even ones, what's the one in Duluth? The performing
That's the
art.
one,
No,
the
I'm
one
not
in Duluth.
Duluth, Lawrenceville.
Oh, oh, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know
Something
the,
theater.
yeah, yeah,
Aurora? Is it
yeah, the
Aurora?
Aurora Theater. Well,
Okay.
it's either that, yeah, the Aurora Theater. Yeah,
But that one's subsidized by the city of Lawrenceville
correct,
because,
correct.
so even if a city's not the sole owner, oftentimes some of these they don't perform as well. And
Mhm.
so, yes, so it's not uncommon. So for those who are like, oh, a city shouldn't be doing this. Well, again, I don't, it depends on, again, if is there an underperforming parcel? Is there a direction that the private sector is going that is not in the best interest of the public? I mean, there are instances where a city is like, you know what, we need to have our finger on the scale
Let
of
me
letting
point
you
out,
know
let me point out one other thing. The Simpsonwood Park. That was possibly the Simpsonwood United Methodist
Methodist
Conference, I
Church.
guess,
Yep, yep.
right? Not the church across the street, but the conference
Yeah, the
itself, I
conference.
guess,
Yep.
right? They were looking to sell what was supposed to be into a park into perpetuity, eventually, essentially, when they received it. But they were going to sell it to commercial developers. There would
Yep.
have been maybe close to 200 or 300 homes there that could, at the time, reasonably have been rezoned because it was next to residential and it was a use that was not against what was there. Now, townhouses would have been different back then, but R3 or 60 homes next to North Manor and stuff, perfectly the same type of residential.
Nope.
Could have been that. City stepped in with the county, gave $1 million to help purchase it, if I remember correctly. And that was a good
Oh
use of,
no, we gave like
how much did you give?
3 million and the
Three
county
million?
did like eight or
There you go.
nine. Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
we
so it's
both
a
threw in.
so it was a total of 11 million, I think, to
Yeah.
buy that, right? So 3 million. I am wrong. See, and that was a good use of that money to be able to keep that parkland. I've not heard of Gwinnett County Parks ever selling land that's parks. Someone had asked me that because they were buying a house butting up to that. And they were like, "Do you think they'll ever sell that?" I'm like, I've never heard of a parks department ever selling that type of land for commercial use or residential.
Yeah, it's pretty rare. And now that's got a conservation easement over it as
That's
well.
right.
I mean,
Yep.
so, but yeah, so, I just wanted to speak to that for those who are like, oh, city shouldn't be doing it. Well, I think that's a case by case basis, but it is not uncommon. So that's one. Another point I wanted to make is for those who are like, I can't believe the city purchased this without a fully baked plan. And I would be the first to say, in a perfect world,
Mm.
that would be great. We end up, involving ourselves to have a use come in that we've fully vetted. I mean, we've done all the work,
Hmm.
the market retail experts have said the market will support it. We have a developer ready to go. We have the numbers all work and so we purchase it and we turn around and we execute the plan. In a perfect world, that would be great, but we
Hmm.
aren't in a perfect world, and this is an evolving situation on a building that was, the use wasn't ideal anymore. The user had, closed up the
Yep.
doors,
Yep.
and the follow-on uses were not uses that would not create problems or be underwhelming themselves. So yeah, we would love to have that all done beforehand, but targets of opportunity are just that. It was an opportunity that came up, we could get control of it at a price that was reasonable. And then now, maybe the most important thing, you've brought this up before, some of the council members, like, Alex Wright brought it up recently,
Mhm.
is to say, now that we've got it, council can move through the upcoming stages of getting to a point where we agree on these are the uses we're going to really explore. That process can take as long or as short as we need it to take. We don't have a proverbial gun to our head on some sort of a deadline,
Right. Yeah.
whatever. And we've got to move fast and we just got to settle because somebody's like, if you don't do it now, whatever. We can take our time to do it right,
Hmm.
and that's the one advantage of this that we wouldn't have if we were hoping that, somebody
And
else did it.
and I'll extend it a little further. It's an advantage the citizens have here. Now there's always those people that will say we don't trust the city. Um, they've looked at other things that have happened along the way over the past few years, and maybe they're distrustful of some things. That's an opinion, right? Um, because you can have an opinion about all sorts of things. So there will be people that feel that this is half baked. But to me, instead of looking at the negative, I always look at the positive. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the citizens to see, along with their government elected officials, to see what they would like there. So I've heard all sorts of comments about, it would be great to have an arts center. It would be great to have a Top Golf. So that's too small of an area for that. So I mean, some of the suggestions are just a bit out there, which is fine. It's okay. It's good. It's good to have. You want feedback because even something like that might might give you spark of a different idea. Um, I even looked at like COSM, I think it's called COSM in the city. That's too big. That's about 37 or 34,000 square feet. But I mean that type of idea, or
Although
even
they're building smaller ones.
Yes,
They
they
are
are.
building smaller
Which
ones.
which could be, the idea that this is a 2 acre piece of land with possibly another 2 acres behind it. If something came in that was good enough to do this, where maybe it's even multiple things, not a place where it's like a flea market where there's a VR, golf thing here, or there's something here, and a little record store here, but something a little bit more planned out, like an amusement or hub or entertainment hub that by day is a friendly place for families to go and do things, and then by night and weekends, or by night, it's a really business friendly place to be, because we don't have anything like that. The people have complained that we have nothing like that. They have to go to Alpharetta, or not even Johns Creek. Alpharetta is probably the place. So, well, when Medley comes on, maybe
Yeah, I was gonna say, although
maybe
Johns
Johns
Creek's
Creek.
coming online with Medley,
Yes,
and that's gonna
yes,
now, Rico, that's a great segue to talk about the next steps
yeah.
because you are one person, one resident, and we
Mhm.
could spend the next hour with you coming up with pretty cool ideas. And,
Yeah.
so, once we decided to purchase this, I knew my next step was to establish a process and get some experts in for a couple reasons. One is you could be just, machine gunning me with options right now,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I could be hearing them and be like, "Oh, that's cool, that's cool." What I know is at the city, and we certainly have made mistakes and do make mistakes even in our core areas of expertise, managing and regulating city right of way, and things like that. That's our
Mhm.
expert, and we still make mistakes, but we certainly don't have expertise in real estate development. And so, I was like, I know that I didn't want internal staff,
Mhm.
good as some of my staff are, and even as knowledgeable in general about this, to be the ones to get into the market analysis of what the market will support, what's out
Mhm.
there, in the US, or greater than that, what type of developers might be interested in this. So it was like, look, let's make sure that we get some experts in, and that's who JLL is. And they have been, we've had one meeting where we laid out the whole thing, and council was like, look, go forth and analyze this parcel and what might work that we can
Mhm.
still continue to explore. What you already know might not work based on things like, it's cost prohibitive, or it wouldn't be synergistic with the town center, whatever. Let's kind of separate those two, and let's explore two distinct development tracks. One is what might be out there that could come in and occupy the existing building, even if you gut the interior of the building,
Right,
but what
right.
it occupy the existing building, maybe the parking lot, the surface parking lot next to it,
Mhm.
and us have somebody kind of like fill in, the existing footprint, even if well, that's one extreme. And in fact, let me back up and say there's really three. There's two extremes and one in the medium. One extreme is just try to fill the existing building with a use case that we like.
Right. Mhm.
The other extreme would be like, all right, remove the constraints of the building. What could we put there if the city decided to demo that building, take now what's 2 acres of the CineBistro purchase, maybe even add it to the 2 acres that are behind it, which would be the acreage that's kind of in between the back of Summit, Debbie Mason
Mhm.
Memorial on one end, and Fort Payne Wall on the
And
other.
on the other side.
And
Yeah.
then Peachtree Corners Circle itself, where if you're on it, it's the little retaining wall that has the mural on it.
Hmm.
Those constraints, that those kind of four corners, and we could expand it 2 more acres by just having to move the dog park somewhere else.
Right.
The dog park's the only thing in the middle. So the other extreme would be we end up demoing the building and look at what we could do with 4 acres.
Hmm.
And then there's an in-between model, and that is maybe we use most of the existing building, but maybe there's some degree of redevelopment of a side of it. And probably more specifically, what I'm thinking is CineBistro was not architecturally designed to be tied into the town green performance directly.
Yes, yes. I
You
was thinking
brought
this.
this
I
up
think,
before is you've got
yeah,
that
open
unique
that
eating
space up.
area and it's
Yeah,
behind the screen.
yeah.
And so maybe there is some sort of maybe the
I mean,
screen gets moved to a different location and you
mhm,
tie into the building, but it's an intermediate step. But all three of those avenues
mhm.
need JLL is looking at what are those options and use cases and kind of the numbers. And then they are going to come back with their cursory evaluation and share with council. Council may end up tweaking the message. And then we're going to schedule a big community meeting. We're going to
We're
invite
looking at
the community and we haven't
a couple of
scheduled it
months,
yet. It's
maybe.
going to
Right.
probably, because I want JLL to tell me when they got far enough along that they'll be like, all right, by a date certain, we'll be ready. And then I can set the date.
Hmm.
But I want to set this up to where the presentation at the community meeting will be what JLL's market research analysis has produced,
Hmm.
share it with the community about the different options, and then say, okay, now you kind of know what, as much as city council and we do, now it's time to start exploring specific use cases. What do you as a community, what would you like to see
Hmm.
based on what you've heard us give you as the market realities? Talk to us about how you think it should be, it should be used. Is an adaptive reuse of just the existing building, are those use cases good enough? Or if you want something really big, let's talk about it, but let's also talk about the realities of, you know, really big, meaning
Hmm.
starting from scratch is great because you and I can have the visions of sugar plums dancing in our heads about it,
Yeah.
but
Mm-hmm.
really big opportunities usually come with really big costs. So now you're
Mm-hmm.
probably talking about a public-private partnership.
Right.
You're
And
talking
I
about,
think,
because you're talking about big money.
right. And I think we agree that that's not a that could be part of it. A public-private partnership could be part of it.
Definitely.
That we talked about how the property could still be owned by the city, just leased to whatever business
Yep.
it is.
Or we could flip it. We
Or
could
you
find
could flip
somebody
it.
who just
Right.
wants to own it and we're
Right.
out. Or it could be
Or
ground lease just
right.
above ground. I mean,
Right. There's so many aspects of it.
there
For
are.
the city to be able to own the future of it, might even be better for them to own it and lease it. But every business, any business developer that comes in, I mean, most of them will probably be good with that because why own the land when they could just lease it, right, and do the stuff. The other option too that citizens can look at, and one of the biggest things that have been commented about, has been no apartments, no multifamily, no residential, which I think everyone agrees, even on the city council. I don't, nary one of them, that multifamily is probably not going to be part of that equation and would actually be almost a rule set that it shouldn't be even considered, right? I mean,
Yeah, Rico,
that is the biggest complaint that
yeah,
people have, that there'll be more apartments.
I think based on my conversation with all of council, that it
Right.
is fair to say that there will not be a rental residential component to this at all.
Mhm.
I don't know so far as maybe there's some equity. I find it hard to how that would, equity.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure there's going to be a residential component at all. That one's a little bit tough because, the only way you make an equity product work is probably it's a really expensive
right.
equity and it's not that many units. And so it doesn't make sense, but I think it is probably very fair to say that there won't be any apartments as anything because council will end up, if we do have a private partner come in, tell them up front, we're not going to entertain any proposals that have apartments, period. So
Well, I mean,
don't even submit.
if I could take a step further, and you know I will, is that there shouldn't be any residential on that piece of land. And that any business or developer that comes in that says, now we can't do this without residential, is that to me is like, it's always the same mantra. It's like they can't do it without residential. We got to do it with residential. And no bank's gonna do blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I think that's all BS in this particular piece of land because there's so much opportunity in this piece of land to do something way different than and if the city controls the land, it's certainly doable, right?
It is doable. It is definitely doable because again, that's the beauty of control is you get to
Yes.
say no. And again, you know, that's probably fair again to say there. I don't see a scenario where you could have any amount of residential, but again, I'm just saying from council's comments, the rental of anything, rental product is definitely a no-no in their mind. But again, when you remove the rental component and you can't build townhomes there, so now townhomes are not in the mix. So the only product left is a condo. And it's not going to be a tower. You're not going to have 7 stories right there. So I don't see how anybody would be interested to make the
You,
numbers work on a condo anyway. So that's why
yeah,
I
I
don't
agree
think
with
the
that. Yeah.
residential is going to be a,
Yeah.
a factor of this.
Okay.
But again, to your point, control is the beauty here,
Yeah.
and council will be able to end up literally not just through, oh, I don't think we're going to, accept those change of conditions. In this case, it literally has complete and utter ability to do this or
That's
this,
right. That's right.
and that
Because
has value.
it's not like they own like the developer owns the land. And we talked about this rights of landowners to be able to do what they can or want within the scheme of things. Because if someone bought that land and said, you know what, it can only be apartments, they can point to Solace, they can point to the
Yep.
multifamily across the way and say, you are borrowing me from the best use of this property, which is multifamily. And there's multifamily here already. So I should be able to zone multifamily. This is the argument that's always made, right?
Yeah, it will be
Yeah.
if somebody's foolish enough, but then they don't have the demand, they don't have the demand argument like they used to. The forum
Mm,
and where some Solus is, were both rezoned at the same meeting.
yeah.
But the argument there is you have a downtown that doesn't have almost any on-site residential. We had what, 80 townhomes
Mhm.
or 60, I can't remember right there, but
Yeah.
that was it. And they're like, that argument is no longer there. One of the two have been built already, and the other one
Right.
is still entitled. So
Right.
I don't see that either. But
No,
I
I
also
agree
think
with
that
you.
council would, if we end up getting into a relationship with a private partner, I think that relationship is going to be built on an upfront understanding that they want to maximize this for the town center and where
Mm,
and the town
no,
center now has on-site residential, so you don't need anymore.
good. So, okay, we've,
But
yeah,
if you want to end though with,
yes,
what's
please.
important, I was going to say, what's important is the community is going to have an opportunity
Yes.
to hear what the consultants have, you know, have learned about the property, have evaluated our legitimate options through those kind of three via, avenues,
Mhm.
and will be able to provide with mayor and council there, the entire team with things that the community thinks would be good uses.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Rico, because I'm sure you'll be there, and
Yes.
or your
Yeah.
or one of
Yeah.
your staff or whatever, but in the meantime you want to talk about, there's nothing that hurts somebody if they have an idea to share it even right now. I mean, they won't have the benefit of hearing JLL's market evaluation, but right
Right.
now the people have ideas and we want to hear those ideas, because council is not going to make a decision on this until A, they know what the market will support
Hmm.
and what we can afford, and B, what the community wants, and our job is going to be to try to marry those things up.
Yeah, and actually, there's no reason not to get even that before even the study comes out. So you're right. I mean, because in fact, when people, when they could take that into even consideration into what they're doing.
Yeah.
But there will be time. I'm going to probably at some point do a live stream on Instagram where I will invite people to talk to me, to make comments, to be part of that video live stream to talk about what could be there. Because there's a variety of things people, and I'll make a list of it, but there's really a variety of things that
There
people have
are.
suggested. Some of them obviously won't work in the particular way, like Top Golf or maybe certain other things. But there's some good sparks of ideas in this stuff. So we'll come back to you all, who listeners here, and if you have more comments, certainly put it into the comments on whether you're listening to this on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, the on our YouTube channel. Just put your comments there. You might be listening to this as a live stream, even, which is a recorded live stream. So if that's the case, but leave your comments, and those things will be pulled together, and I will share them with City Council and stuff. But so yeah, Brian, it's good. We're going to talk a lot more about this as the months go by.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot more to talk about. In the meantime, we're gonna we're gonna finish eating this. I'm at Park 27 Korean Steakhouse. And again, this is not a paid sponsorship. I'm just decided to eat somewhere, and I thought this would be a good place to do a podcast. So this is the virtue of being a podcaster, and the technology allows me to do this from anywhere, right? So, Brian, I appreciate you joining me. Hang in there with me for a minute. Everyone else, thank you. Bon appetit. You should visit Park 27. It's a little hidden here in the Forum at the very end, across from Jason's Deli and right next to Politan Row. So great stuff, great menu, high-end food as well. By the way, when you come here for lunch, the ticket price is no different than any other place. Very nice, economical for you as well. So hang in there, Brian. Thanks. Thank you, guys.